Hey, well, hello, everyone, and welcome to our weekly message discussion. I want to let you know we are starting a brand new schedule of programming here online with the goal of providing you all with more connection opportunities with each other here online as we're going through this kind of stay-at-home season, continuing. My name is Eric, and I'm here with Andrew, and we are excited about this new schedule. In fact, tomorrow I want to let you know that Todd will be here with a weekly Q&A. He's going to be answering questions about life, about the Bible, about the church, and more. So he'll be live right here at noon. Then on Wednesday, we've got the weekly devotional at noon and weekly worship at 7 p.m. Then we're moving on to Thursday, where we're going to bring you an inside look into a different ministry or a different campus, just to give you an idea of what goes on behind the scenes, get to know some of our ministry leaders a little bit better. And then on Friday, we've got Sagebrush News, and our hope and goal is to bring you good news and uplifting stories from around our community, just to see what God is doing here. Like I said, I'm Eric. This is Andrew, and we are starting this weekly discussion. And Andrew, we're in the middle of this series called Monsoon. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, I want to say welcome to all of my friends on Facebook. Usually I am on the other side of this conversation, texting in like crazy and writing to you guys. And so I want to welcome you. This Monsoon series has been an incredible one. And I was a guy who grew up in Southern California, and so I didn't know anything about what a monsoon was. And a monsoon is basically, man, you could be in the nicest possible day, and all of a sudden the black clouds come out of nowhere and it starts pouring rain all around you. And so often that's how our life is, isn't it? Man, we are going through things and clipping along and everything's going great. And then all of a sudden, man, just life hits us over the head. And so this series has been all about how do you deal with the idea of, man, when life doesn't go your way, how do you make it through? And so this last weekend, we talked about how do you overcome the pain of confusion? Because life can be painful, it can be hard, and it can be difficult. So it was great.
Yeah, it was an awesome message. It's actually week 3 right now. We're like 3 weeks into it. So the goal here today is that we hope to ask some questions, have some discussion in order to help you take the concepts from the weekend message and apply them to your lives in a meaningful way. So I want to encourage you, especially if you're on Facebook, you can enter in your answers in the comments. We've got some great chat moderators that are going to be there. In fact, one of our staff members, George, he's going to post the names of all of our online hosts just so you know who you're interacting with. But we want to encourage you to go ahead and put your answers in there. We can see them here as well. Yeah, Matt, I can see you. You're live. I just saw your comment right there. So hi to Matt in the comments. But in addition, if you're watching this afterwards, maybe you're with a small group, maybe with your family, feel free to press pause when we ask the questions so you can discuss them together. And that brings us to a great topic, Andrew. Since this is about kind of a small group study, can you tell us what small groups are like here at the church and why it's so important that we can all be a part of one?
Yeah, well, around here, we believe that life change happens best when you find a small group to join. And this wasn't our idea. Like, we didn't have this great idea to do small groups. We just went back to the concept that happened over 2,000 years ago when the church first began, because they wanted to see that they would take those large groups of people, because, man, thousands of people gave their life to Jesus Christ very quickly. And so they had to have a mechanism to disciple those people, to walk with people who are brand new to their faith. So we do that with small groups. And small groups are groups that are meeting at homes all over Albuquerque, all over now the United States, because we're meeting digitally. And so they just connect regularly and weekly to talk about what they learned from the weekend message, as well as to keep one another accountable and to walk with one another just through life. And we believe that you need that. We believe every person needs a band of brothers or a band of sisters who walk with them through whatever monsoon that you might face.
And so typically if you're meeting with a small group, we have this small group discussion curriculum that you could go through. It's kind of a guide for you so you can help facilitate some conversation. We like to start that off with an icebreaker. So here you go. Here's your question to answer in the comments, or like I said, hit pause and answer with the people around you. What is the most miraculous thing you have seen God do for a friend or family member when they were facing a monsoon in their life? The most miraculous thing you've seen God do for a friend or a family member when they're facing a monsoon in their life. We're going to give you a couple of moments to answer that. But Andrew, what does it look like for you?
Oh man, Eric, how much time do you have? I mean, I could go on for a long time because I've seen so many of these at Sagebrush. I think that the miraculous stories that I've seen a lot of times is a lot of people who've gone through serious debt. Yeah. And I had this one guy who had gone and got his PhD, and he was a young married guy, and him and his wife just really had nothing after they graduated. And man, they were crippled with all that debt. They were over $30,000 in debt, just wondering, how are they going to make ends meet? And so they committed just to praying during that monsoon. And they began to cry out to God just daily, saying, God, please help us, please help us. And they got other people in their church to pray as well. The craziest thing happened, Eric. Like, man, in that moment where they were so in debt, somebody, random stranger from church, paid off the whole debt.
Wow.
So they went from being $30,000 in the hole to being able to be financially free.
That's amazing.
And it was amazing how God just worked in that monsoon of debt. And I could share many stories like that where somebody was sick or somebody was hurting or somebody was in debt where God just came through at the exact moment when was necessary.
Yeah, exactly. And I think being, obviously working for a church, you're closer to some of those stories. You're hearing them in the comments here. Diana said she beat cancer, which is amazing. So for those of you who've seen God do miraculous things in your life as far as healing, Christine said God saved her daughter's life. That's amazing. Looks like Monty says rescued someone from an abusive relationship. A lot of healing, not only physically, but healing relationships as well. So I think that is just amazing. So keep entering those in and encouraging each other. But this past weekend, Todd used a story from the New Testament about a man who's really one of his good friends called Lazarus to speak to some of our where's God moments in our lives. So if you have a Bible, go ahead and get it out. Or if you want to take note for later, we're going to be in John chapter 11, starting in verse 1. It says, a man named Lazarus was sick. He lived in Bethany with his sisters, Mary and Martha. This is the Mary who later poured the expensive perfume on the Lord's feet and wiped them with her hair. Her brother Lazarus was sick, so the two sisters sent a message to Jesus telling him, Lord, your dear friend is very sick. Verse 4. But when Jesus heard about it, he said, Lazarus' sickness will not end in death. No, it happened for the glory of God, so that the Son of God will receive the glory from this. So although Jesus loved Mary, Martha, and Lazarus, verse 6, he stayed where he was for the next 2 days. So our question for discussion is this. What do you think Mary and Martha felt when they heard that Jesus stayed where he was for 2 more days before going to see a very sick Lazarus? So what were they feeling, and how would you have felt? Go ahead and discuss that in the comments or hit pause and talk about it in your group. Andrew, what do you think?
I think they would have been really frustrated. I mean, imagine that you had a relative who was sick and had a bad disease.
Well, especially with what's going on in our world today.
I know, right now, like the coronavirus or something else. And what if you heard that a doctor had come up with a cure, right? You hear that this doctor's got this cure, but you know that your loved one is just 2 days away from dying. And you wrote that doctor a letter and you said, please come quickly. You got to bring that cure. You've got to help us out. And that doctor didn't respond. But now imagine it this way. What if that doctor was your friend? Like, what if that doctor you knew personally and they still ignored your text, they ignored your phone call, and they just decided to kind of do their own thing? I'm sure that Mary and Martha were just extremely frustrated by this situation. And I'm sure that this was that moment that Todd talked about this last weekend where they just raised their fist up at God, just wondering, God, where are you?
Yeah, what the heck's going on?
In the midst of all this. And they're in that monsoon of just confusion all around them in that moment.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's the same, and the people in the comments are saying the same thing. Rick says frustrated or let down. Janet saying disappointed. Arlene says scared. I mean, being scared because you might not know what's going to happen to your loved one. This was probably their only, help us, Jesus, you're our only hope, right? Raquel says confused and upset. Certainly, others are commenting in as well. Keep going there, anxious, betrayed. All of these feelings, I think, are the things that they would have felt, and certainly you and I would feel in that same situation. If we continue in John, we read in verse 17. So we're in verse 17 now. When Jesus arrived at Bethany, he was told that Lazarus had already been in his grave for 4 days. So he passed away. He's dead. Bethany was only a few miles down the road from Jerusalem, and many of the people had come to console Martha and Mary in their loss. When Martha got word that Jesus was coming, she went to meet him, but Mary stayed in the house. Martha said to Jesus, Lord, if only you had been here, my brother would not have died. But even now, I know that God will give you whatever you ask. Man, what a response. So after reading verses 17 through 22, here's a question to discuss. Is there an area of your life where you feel similarly to Martha in these verses? If so, what area of your life is that? And let us know in those comments, or go ahead and pause and discuss as your group. So Andrew, is there an area of life where you feel similar to Martha in these verses? And if so, what is it?
I think right now, currently with this quarantine, I'm in that place where I'm confused and wondering. I mean, the Poes are living right now a new normal. I mean, it's crazy. Let me tell you. I mean, I'm working at home. We've got our kids at the house. We're trying to homeschool them.
Yeah.
My wife is a registered nurse.
Oh.
And so, I mean, this last week, she had to hold the hand of a lady who died of the coronavirus. Like, no one was able to be in that room with my wife and just that lady. And so we're now living a new normal. And we're asking the question, honestly, as a family, like, where's God in all this?
Right.
We're wondering, man, are our kids going to ever be able to go back to school? Are we going to ever get them out of our house, Eric? I mean, literally, they are around us all the time. And we're just wondering.
There are not enough rooms in the house.
There's not enough
to
rooms.
get away.
We moved into a smaller house. It wasn't a good idea. But we're just wondering, where is God in this? And I think you might be sitting at home wondering the same thing. Maybe you've lost your job. Maybe, your family has been affected by this virus. Maybe your income has been cut into as a result of this. And man, you might be in that same place too, where we're all wondering, God, where are you?
Right.
We're all kind of confused right now, just trying to work this one out. So I think that's where I'm at right now. That's what I'm going through. And I think Mary and Martha were right there too.
Yeah, and I think you touched on it because it's not only a situation where it's health, right? Mary and Martha are going through something like, where was God with the health of our loved ones? But Sabrina is talking about finances, Molly says relationships, and so there's a number of different areas that you're kind of going, where are you? And sure, this current situation we're all in has kind of given us all level ground, essentially. We're all facing some of the same things, but that doesn't change all the stuff that happened before, and it may not change some of those things afterwards. We're still going to be battling with finances and relationships and addictions. So those are all key things to be thinking through. So keep it going with your answers in the comments below. These are great. As we continue on, there was the ending part of the story in verse 43. It says, then Jesus shouted, Lazarus, come out. And the dead man came out. His hands and feet bound in grave clothes, his face wrapped in a headcloth. Jesus told them, unwrap him and let him go. Now, this weekend, I love the message because Todd pointed out, he said, while Mary, I want to get this right, he said, while Mary and Martha wanted a healing, Jesus planned a resurrection. So in what area of your life, here's a question for discussion, in what area of your life are you looking for God to work? And what would it look like to ask him for a resurrection in that area instead of a healing? What do you think, Andrew?
Yeah, I think that I would go to the same situation with this virus and this quarantine as well, is that, man, I'm looking for God to resurrect us up.
Yeah.
I'm looking for God to bring both our country and our church and everywhere else back to life. And that's what I'm seeing, Eric, is, man, as I'm having conversation with people, man, they're really using this time to turn to the Lord.
Yeah.
Man, I've been surprised by my neighbors who are walking around who are now asking me questions as a pastor about, man, what is this? And what are the signs? And what's taking place here and there? And people are really hungry for God. And man, I'm hoping that God takes this impossible situation, this virus, and man, he brings a resurrection.
Yes.
That, man, he could do something incredibly new, whether it's in our own life.
Right.
Because that resurrection might be inside of me, right? Where it's like, man, maybe I wasn't depending upon God enough, and man, God's used the situation to draw me near to him. Or maybe the resurrection is our country maybe coming back to faith. And hopefully when churches open back up again, man, God will just fill our church with people who are just hungry to learn about Jesus.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what I'm hoping right now.
Yeah, I agree with you too. And I had somebody ask a question, one of my Facebook friends, had a couple questions, but one thing was like, are you looking forward to things going back to normal? And at first, my first reaction is yes, of course. There are so many things I wish I could get a haircut from an actual barber. Like my wife did a great job.
She did awesome.
But you know.
She's good.
Thanks. Well, like I want to be able to go out to dinner and sit with friends and, that sort of thing. But it got me thinking, I don't want things to go back to normal because God has put this situation in our lives for a reason, right?
Yep.
Why did he delay with Lazarus? And he says, to give him glory. Right? And so what is it that God is going to do and glorify in my life? And so for me, the amount of time, as much as it's like frustrating to be around my family at times, I'm getting so much more time to spend with my kids, and we're connecting in new ways, and it's really forcing us to do some different things. So some other people have commented, obviously some of these areas, we're hoping for those resurrections in the different areas of our life, and to bring back marriages, to bring back finances, bring back relationships, all of these things. Let's transition to one of our final questions here. Based on Jesus' purpose for his seeming delay in going to see Lazarus, why might he respond similarly sometimes in our lives? Andrew, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it's the same situation. Jesus was all about the glory of God, and he wanted to see God lifted up and his name lifted up. And sometimes in our life, we hit a moment where we just don't understand what's going on. We hit that monsoon and it's like, oh man, this doesn't make sense. I mean, why was everything going so good and then all of a sudden everything just seems to fall apart?
Right.
And I think when you start to look back, right? When you look back at how many times God came through for you, how many times that God just intervened at just the right time. I'm not one that believes in accidents because he always puts me in the right place at the right time. I mean, there's no reason right now that this guy from California is in New Mexico.
Right.
Other than that we have a big God who has a huge sense of humor. And he moved me to this place for a reason, to do this great work in the ministry. And I don't doubt it anymore.
Yeah,
because now I'm on the other end of doing 10 years worth of ministry at this church, and I love every single moment of it. So I think God delays sometimes to teach us.
Right.
Because he always wants to teach us more. He wants to stretch our faith. He wants to stretch our belief in him. And I believe he wants to do an even bigger work in and through us.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I love Todd's point this past weekend on perspective. Right?
Yeah.
We don't see things the way that they are. We see them the way that we are. And the perspective story he told about the little boy and the farm and being poor
so
and
good.
realizing how poor he was. And I know there's people in the comments that are talking through, and I love it, that they're waiting for this resurrection for people to give their lives to Christ.
Yes.
And for some of us, that's been a kid, that's been a grandkid. That's, for me, it's a grandparent. You know what I mean? You're waiting for God to do a true, real resurrection in their lives. And God might be delaying for some reason, but it's all about that perspective that sometimes we won't even know this side of heaven. So that's what makes it kind of tough, but also
Tough and
amazing
hard.
at the same time.
That's why I love Lazarus' story though, right?
Yeah.
Because so Lazarus is resurrected from the dead. And then just a few days later, Jesus goes into Jerusalem and the people crowd the streets on Palm Sunday to welcome him in. And so that was all done as a way just to bring this groundswell support around Jesus as the one who came, the one that they hoped for, the one that they longed for, the one who was going to make things right.
That's exactly right. And I think that that's part of, we've got this whole perspective thing, going back to what Todd said too, thinking about your perspective. One of the best things that we could do is help share with each other. And so right now we're having this discussion here. It's part of the reason why we're inviting you to the discussion. We're seeing in the comments, people are praying for each other. That is amazing.
So
Keep
good.
that going. And it brings us to kind of this last thought to think through. Who is one friend you can turn to when you hit a monsoon? And how can you be that friend to someone else in your life? So if you're meeting in a small group right now, maybe look around and say, how can we dedicate ourselves to being that friend with each other? If you don't have someone in your life, it's a great opportunity to join a small group. But consider, who's that person you can turn to when you hit a monsoon? And how can you be that type of person to someone else? So if you're thinking about that and you're thinking about joining a small group, I would encourage you to do so. Andrew, what are some of the steps they can take to get involved in a small group?
Yeah, the easiest way to get into a small group is you can just comment in right now, and we will go through all of these different comments, and we will make sure that somebody contacts you directly so that you can get into a small group. Just put your name or something like that, and we will find you in our church database. If we don't have your information, we will contact you because we want to make sure that every single person finds a group to join. If you have your Sagebrush app, you can go to the Decisions tab. That's another easy way. Just go to the Decisions tab and put that you want to join a small group, and we will call you this week. If you don't have access to the Sagebrush app, just go to the Sagebrush website, and you can go onto the small group section of the Sagebrush website, and you can join a group there.
And I'm sure somebody will help us out and actually put the link in the comments so that you can just click the link anyway. So it'll be there. The other thing that we talked about that was so encouraging is to see you praying for each other.
Yeah.
And that's important. And if you have prayer requests, you can enter them in the comments and we'll have some people responding. But you can also go to the app and enter a prayer request there as well. So that way there's just multitudes of volunteer team members that are going to be praying for you as well. And speaking of that, Andrew, would you mind praying for everybody here to wrap us up?
Yeah, let's pray. God, thank you so much for this time that we've had just to sit and to focus on you. God, I pray for all those who are out there, Lord, who feel scattered and who feel disconnected, that God, today you might do a resurrection in their own life, that God, you might change them on the inside. And Father, I pray through this whole virus that we might just learn to depend upon you more. God, we may not understand this moment. We might be confused. But Lord, I pray that you would intervene, that God, you would be our hope, that you would fill us with joy, that you'd take all the dark clouds away, and God, that you'd bring your true light. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. For all of you commenting in there that would love to join a small group, we want to get you connected because we really believe that will help you bring the help that you need and the perspective to get through some of these monsoons. And then don't forget, join us tomorrow at noon where Pastor Todd is going to be right here, I think probably right here.
Yeah, he's taking my place.
Yeah, and he's going to be answering questions live. So we collected some questions from you earlier in the week, but you want to get in those comments because he's going to be taking some comments from you right here on Facebook. So on behalf of Andrew, I'm Eric. Thank you so much for joining us, and we will see you next week.